So, what you're telling me is that while we're not physically connecting the components together on an on-prem network, leveraging AWS is almost just as complex with all of the different options and functions that we have in the cloud. Hey, Ryan, let's talk about the various AWS subservices. I know there's a ton of them, so can you walk us through the core ones that we typically run into?
Yeah, Kilian, AWS is pretty complex, and there are a lot of different things that you can do with it. And you can kind of break it down into different areas. If we're talking about some basic networking components and users and roles and policies, things like permissions that we might have to deal with day to day, a lot of that is going to be managed through something like the IAM subservice. So that's built right into your AWS account and allows you to manage a lot of that through the admin portal.
So, in terms of kind of how things are set up, where would we typically find like the infrastructure, and maybe more importantly, in which section will we find the data?
Definitely. I think two more categories come to mind here. One is the compute component, and one of the most common services that we see there is EC2. This is where we can start to spin up things like virtual instances to, run different operating systems on top of and perform a lot of our workloads. But then on the other hand, we also have more of the pure data side, things like S3. You can store data as objects within S3 buckets, almost more like a traditional file system at that point. So a couple different options there. And then of course, within the AWS world, you can get really creative with things like Lambda functions. These are serverless functions that allow you to achieve, outputs based off of running certain criteria. You don't really have to deal with the infrastructure components underlying that. But it's a really great way to start to bring all these different network components together.
So, what you're telling me is that while we're not physically connecting the components together on an on-prem network, leveraging AWS is almost just as complex with all of the different options and functions that we have in the cloud.
Uh,
That was a great intro, and keep an eye out for future videos where we really dive into these individual services in more detail.